Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Mindful in Minutes podcast. I'm Kelly, and today we are going to talk all about how to heal your nervous system in 30 days. Now, I say heal in quotation marks because that's not exactly how it works. And I want to dive into that because I think a lot of marketing and short form content around the nervous system is quite misleading. So I want to dive into just that. Like, what exactly does it mean to, quote, heal your nervous system? Is that something that's even possible? And you all loved the episode that I did on languishing and how to get out of that state in 30 days, that I wanted to return to this idea about what realistically you can do in 30 days, but look at it through this lens of supporting your nervous system. So the plan for the day, the plan for our time together is I want to talk briefly about the nervous system. We've done many episodes on the nervous system, so just a brief overview of what it is. Then I want to talk about what a regulated nervous system looks like versus a dysregulated nervous system and what this actually means. I think this is where a lot of the misconception comes in. And then signs that maybe your nervous system might be dysregulated. I want to talk about why saying you can heal your nervous system or heal it in 30 days is a little bit misleading. And then I want to give my personal realistic 30-day nervous system sort of reset and regulation plan. I had so much fun, just like I did at the languishing episode, just sitting down and being like, okay, if I had 30 days, if one of you came to me as a private client and said, I want my nervous system to feel as good as it possibly can realistically in 30 days, how would I do that? I just had so much fun dreaming and coming up with this 30-day plan. So that is what we are going to dive into today. I also want to say, in case I forget to talk about it later in the episode, that I do have that 5-day nervous system reset. It's on my website. It's completely free. If you want to jumpstart your nervous system work, I think that would be a great place to start. Every day, it's just like an email thing. So every day you get an email. It has a guided meditation for a different aspect of your nervous system, a little bit of learning around the nervous system, and then a challenge to help you get more regulated every day. Each day takes less than 20 minutes with all of that included. So I'll link to that in the show notes if you haven't done that before or if you want to do it again. There's that. So if I don't talk about it, I think that's a great place to start if you're wanting to support your nervous system. So diving in, a brief overview about the nervous system, because like I said, we have done episodes that are in depth about the nervous system and meditation, also the vagus nerve. So if you want to dive really deep, you can revisit those episodes. But basically an overview of what I mean when I say nervous system, because I think sometimes we use the phrase, my nervous system is dysregulated, without really knowing what that means or what part of the nervous system that we're talking about. So let's break it down just a little bit. Your nervous system overall is your body's communication network. So it's how your brain talks to your body and how your body talks back to your brain and how you interpret information from the world around you, how you decide, often without realizing it, whether you're safe or not. So there's 3 main pieces of the nervous system: the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system. So the central nervous system, this is your brain and your spinal cord. This is like the command center. It processes information. It makes decisions. It stores memories. It interprets experience. It processes sensory information. It regulates those automatic functions like breathing and heart rate and things like that. The peripheral nervous system, this is all of the nerves that branch out from the brain and the spinal cord into the rest of your body. So into your organs, your muscle, your skin. This is how you feel your heart beating faster. So you have the central nervous system, which sort of controls the actual heartbeat itself. But the reason that you can feel your heart beating faster is because of the peripheral nervous system, the nerves around it. It's how you can feel butterflies in your stomach, or how maybe your shoulders or your jaw kind of might instinctively tighten when you're stressed or worried without you really voluntarily choosing to tighten them. It facilitates sensory input and motor output. And it's really divided into these 2 systems, which are the somatic system, which is voluntary, and then the autonomic, which is the involuntary system. So somatic voluntary, that's choosing when I'm Like, okay, I'm going to move my arm, right? That's voluntary. But then we have these involuntary systems, the autonomic system, which leads us to the autonomic nervous system. So autonomic means automatic, and this system really runs in the background, and it's a part of the peripheral nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system is constantly adjusting based on what it perceives. So it operates largely unconsciously. So it just is running kind of in the background. It's maintaining homeostasis through two main sort of opposing states, which are fight or flight and rest and digest, which I am certain you have heard of those two before, if certainly on this podcast, but elsewhere. And this is where this idea of like having different states for your nervous system comes in. So I'm sure you know these as fight or flight, rest and digest, but then there's also the third, which is freeze or shut down. And I imagine even just saying those, if I say, okay, what does fight or flight feel like? You can automatically, you know what that feels like. Or rest and digest. Maybe you can imagine and think about what that feels like, or like a freeze state or a shutdown state. These are things that we just know. We know what these things are because we experience them, and we experience them at different times, maybe at different points within the day or weeks, months, years. Hopefully, not a lot of us are experiencing a complete freeze or shutdown, but it can happen. But this is the important part. So none of these states are bad or necessarily better than one another. Of course, some feel more pleasant than the other, but they all serve their purpose and they are protective in some way. So even when we talk about things like anxiety, and we talk about how anxiety is not pleasant, but it is this survival mechanism. It is us remembering maybe things that didn't go right in the past, and we want to try to protect ourselves from that happening again, right? We have like our bodies and our brains adapt in a way to help keep us safe. And so these different states are all important, and some are more pleasant than others, but they're not necessarily more important. And often we're chronically more in a state of fight or flight than rest and digest. I will say, though, playing devil's advocate in my own podcast, I guess if there are people out there that are like in a chronic state of rest and digest and they're just so mellow and calm and all of that, I guess maybe they wouldn't like be listening to a meditation podcast, because they're already in this like chronic state of rest and digest. So maybe they're out there, I just don't hear from them. But what I hear collectively, not just from the people that I work with and that are in my orbit, but like online and everywhere, it seems like we are chronically in this state of fight or flight. It's also kind of what science suggests as well, that this is something that we collectively struggle with. And so when this is happening, your nervous system is not trying to sabotage you. It's not trying to, it's not the enemy here. It's trying to keep you alive. And if it senses threat, it's going to go, oh, ding, 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 activate, mobilize, prepare to fight or flee. And your nervous system is always scanning for safety, constantly. It's always looking for this sensory input. And the more of a stimulating world that we live in, then the more that we are getting that sensory input, and the more that we have to scan to potentially find these, quote, threats, which is part of the reason why when we talk about like overstimulation, or like when you feel like when you're in a really busy place, like maybe you're in an airport, for example, and you feel like you have to be on high alert. It's because there's just so much going on that our nervous system can't really take in everything. It's trying to scan and look for threats or safety and all of these different signals. And that's why it's so exhausting and often overwhelming, is because there's just too much going on that our nervous systems become hypervigilant and we just can't process it all or scan through it all. And so things that you might be taking in through your environment could be something like someone's tone of voice. A lot of us listening, I imagine that we can think of a time where someone used what felt like a threatening tone of voice, or we were talking to someone and all of a sudden their tone of voice just changed and you could feel the energy change in the room. These are things that when we notice, that's our nervous system responding to these things. Facial expressions, lighting. If something's like really, really bright, that can be very overwhelming for the nervous system. Noise levels, body posture, internal sensations, this, sort of the internal systems of like hunger, thirst, things like that, taking in that information, past memories. And your nervous system, it's going to respond to those cues and not just your thoughts. So you can know logically that you're safe. Like, for example, think back to the airport. Don't they say that, maybe people just tell me this, I am a nervous flyer and I don't love airport. Let me tell you guys, I hate leaving my house, but I love leaving the country, and I do like to travel. But is anyone really a fan of the airport situation? And the flights just make me nervous when I think about I know it all works, but the physics of it, where I'm this thing weighs a bajillion tons, yet it's flying in the air, and I don't know, whatever. So I think about this airport, and they, hello, back to my point, ADHD Kelly. But I think that they say airports, once you're on the other side of security, statistically speaking, are one of the safest places that you can be, because you just went through security and, all that, whatever. But so you can logically know that you're safe in that airport. But if there's just so much going on, and everyone there often has that energy, they're rushing to catch flights, and everyone is stressed there. And so the collective energy is just sort of this hypervigilance. And so our nervous systems are responding to that energy, even if logically we know that these people aren't rushing around because maybe they're just late for a flight, or they're feeling flustered because they also don't like airports. But our bodies and our nervous systems might interpret that as I don't know, why is everyone so on edge? Maybe I should be on edge. And it's getting this information, even if you logically know that you're probably safe there. My one last side quest about airports, and I don't know if your airports are doing this, but I went to the airport the other day, I think when I was headed to Costa Rica, and they had therapy animals there. They had a dog that you could pet if you were, it was just so sweet. But anyways, lots about airports. But I think if you want to have a true nervous system experience, just think about being in a busy, bustling airport. And it's really easy to feel that sensation. But if your body is picking up these cues that maybe feel threatening or feel stressful, or maybe they feel either conflicting within you, or you're ooh, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe you get overloaded. It's going to respond automatically, because the nervous system is designed to keep you alive, to keep you safe, to help you survive. And also this part isn't great, because it also can respond to when you think about something distressing. So chances are, when I was just talking about that airport and you feel a similar way to airports as I do, you might also feel a little bit ooh, you might be able to feel, even though maybe you're outside walking or, driving in your car or something, you might feel your nervous system even start to engage and react a little bit to me just describing the hustle, bustle, and stress of an airport. And so your nervous system can respond to thinking about something distressing, or seeing it on TV, or on social media when you're scrolling. And your nervous system doesn't just respond to the actual physical safety of the moment or the environment that you're in. And so you're getting a lot of this activating information all the time that makes it really, really tough to kick out of that activated fight or flight state, because we're just constantly getting this stimulus. We're constantly getting, whether it be thinking about something stressful, hearing about something stressful, seeing something that is upsetting, being in a busy place where there's just, the energy is kind of hectic. All of that really wreaks havoc on our nervous systems. When we talked about overstimulation, we talked about if you're in a loud place, for example, and your ears, and you're trying to hear and make sense of all the different noises, the different people talking, and then you can't figure out who's saying what, and that signals to your body oh no, there's too much going on, there's chaos. And then that starts to really spike sort of that nervous system into fight or flight. And that's why, even though it's so interesting, because our minds can get us into that fight or flight state, even if physically our bodies are safe, mindset work alone, or just your thoughts, can't necessarily get you out and get you back into a regulated state, which is kind of well, that's not fair. If my mind can get me into fight or flight, why can't I just really work on my mindset? And it doesn't always work that way to reverse it. And that's because the system is reflexive. It's fast, it's protective, and it adapts over time to be stronger and to work quicker and to keep you safer. So if you think about it as firefighters, for example, in the fire station, the more that those firefighters, let's say they're new. They're new firefighters. The more calls that they get, the more that they practice putting their gear on and getting into the fire truck and all of that, the more that they do it, they're going to get better at it. They're going to be able to respond to those fires faster and bigger and be more efficient. That's how our nervous system works too. But the problem is we want it to be working like that when there's an actual threat. When, you're going for a hike and a bear crosses your path and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? We don't want it to be doing that just because we walk into an airport and it feels stressful. And so over time, our sort of firefighters of our body get better at what they're doing, more efficient, faster. They're like, yes, we're going to go fight that fire. But this is what can kind of get us into a more dysregulated state, which is what I really wanted to dive into after sort of just overview of the nervous system. I really wanted to talk about this concept of regulation versus dysregulation. And this is something that I have been looking into and studying quite a bit, not just for like mindfulness purposes and understanding like how the brain-body connection works, but also for me personally, because something that I've been hearing a lot more about is this idea of dysregulation for those who are neurodivergent. And so I have also taken a deep dive into just this general concept of dysregulation because I feel like I hear about it all the time. And I'm like, but what exactly is that? Like, I think it's one of the big buzzwords right now on social media. And I'm like, but what the heck is? So I've been doing a lot of research into this idea of regulation of the nervous system versus dysregulation, what that actually is. And like I said, I think this is where some of the confusion and the misunderstanding about how the nervous system works and what these terms actually mean come into play. So when I hear people say like regulated nervous system, they often picture someone who is just like calm all the time. So we think about perfectly regulated nervous system as like maybe the state that you're in. Like let's say you're in a really great, deep, relaxing, calming meditation, or you are laying on the beach and the sun is shining on your skin and you can hear the waves and you just are like, it's the most peaceful thing ever and you feel amazing. That is how at least the internet, like social media and things like that, like to paint the concept of a regulated nervous system. And I'm just going to say some of these things, and I know it's a marketing, and believe me, I know this because I'm technically in like the wellness space, right? So there's a lot of people who want to sell a lot of things. Even, I'm sure I know you guys get different targeted ads and things like on this podcast, and it'll target some of them based on like your interests. And anyways, it's a whole thing. Or like when I go on YouTube or I'm scrolling on Instagram, podcasts aren't too bad with this, but when I'm scrolling on Instagram and things like that, and you get like those targeted ads, and it's probably because I've been doing all this research into regulated versus dysregulated nervous system. I've been getting so many different products and things targeted to me that say they're going to like completely regulate my nervous system. But the issue that I have with this is because the images that they're using, the words that they're using, the picture that they're painting of this concept of regulation is they're actually just painting that you're going to have a calming, relaxing experience, which is regulating to the nervous system, but it's not the same as a regulated nervous system. And this is what I think is a big misconception kind of out there in like the wellness space, but also like the mindfulness space and just the social media nervous system space. So when people hear regulated nervous system, they often picture someone who's calm all the time, never stressed, never reactive, never overwhelmed. That's not regulation. That's also, that's not like a natural quality of being a human being. Of course, there's moments where we aren't experiencing stress. There are moments in time where we aren't being reactive. There are absolutely moments in time where we aren't feeling overwhelmed. But that isn't just like magically this state like fight or flight that we can just stay in indefinitely. Regulation does not mean the absence of stress. It means flexibility. It means a regulated nervous system is a nervous system that can switch gears between activated and deactivated and respond with flexibility and resilience accordingly. So a regulated nervous system can move into stress when it needs it because we do need it, and then come back out when that stress is over. And we can go back to a deadline. We can go back to a baseline. We can go back to some kind of homeostasis. So it can mobilize for things like deadlines or even a workout, right? We always think that fight or flight, or I guess we should call it more of that like activated state, that can also happen. Like if you're doing, for example, I don't know, a tougher workout or high intensity interval training, lifting weights, things like that, that is activating to the nervous system. A difficult conversation, even being activated when you're having a lot of fun. Like think about going to a concert and you're singing and dancing and jumping around and screaming and all of that and having so much fun. But also in terms of our nervous system, that is like blowing it off the charts. That's activating as well. And so then a regulated nervous system means that you can go and get into this activated state. And then after, you can recover and return to baseline and not stay way in that activated state beyond the actual thing that is activating. So a regulated nervous system will feel everything, even the less pleasant stuff, right? Like there's this one ad, I don't know why I'm like harping on these Instagram ads, but I get it all the time. And it's like, I don't even remember what the product's for, but it's something like, you're not ugly, you just have cortisol face. And I know that these ads are like trying to, I get it. I know what they're trying to achieve here. And obviously it struck a chord with me because I'm talking about it now on this podcast. But it's that type of thing, I think, when people are talking about, and then it went into, I don't remember what the product was, but it went into all these different things that, we're going to regulate your nervous system, lower your cortisol, all of that. But a lot of the things that they were suggesting, we'll talk about this, were things that do regulate a nervous system, but they were using this idea of, quote, a regulated nervous system incorrectly. They were just talking about how you're going to lower your stress and reduce your cortisol. That's not like necessarily what it means to have a regulated nervous system. That just means that you're starting to turn the dial down on some of the stress in your life, which is different. And then the whole cortisol face thing, I don't really like that. I think that's like I don't like what that comment on people's bodies. I just don't like that. But I get that ad, I kid you not, I don't know, like 3 times a day, it seems like. But as you can see, it struck a chord with me because I'm talking about it here. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you get that ad too. Although, you know what? I probably never should have talked about that because I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, maybe not on headphones, it's like all your devices are going to listen and hear me say that. And then you probably will start getting that ad. Because it's always listening. Anyways, okay, reining it back in. A regulated nervous system, it will feel everything, even the less pleasant feelings. So even things like sadness. But a regulated nervous system will be able to manage the sadness. So a regulated nervous system can handle the sadness without absolute complete collapse. Or a regulated nervous system, because it's a flexible nervous system, can handle the anger without a complete explosion. It can feel anxiety before and during public speaking, but then when it's over, you go back to baseline, or you don't spiral for hours or days after that. Regulation is all about range. It's about flexibility and resilience and how easily and reliably you can come back to center. So when people, again, especially on social media, talk about a, quote, regulated nervous system, I really hear them describing what is either chronic rest and digest or just a more relaxed state, which we can't stay in rest and digest for forever. We need some type of, they call it like arousal for our nervous system. And one piece of a regulated nervous system might be that you're able to access that calm space, but it might also feel like you just feel sort of steady. You're not like wired and amped, but you're also not shut down. Maybe your breath is just effortless and easy. So you might not be like, about to fall asleep, but it's like you're able to just breathe effortlessly. Maybe your body isn't like bracing or clenching for no real reason. Maybe you can focus when you need to. Your focus and your nervous system, like your focus gives you a really great insight, or your ability to focus or your struggle to focus does give you a pretty good insight into how your nervous system is doing. And if you think about it, there's a lot on your mind. If you're stressed, you're anxious, it's hard to focus on things. You can rest without feeling guilty or restless. This one is a huge one. I know it is something that a lot of us struggle with. It might feel like stress happens, but it doesn't take over your entire day. Like you are stressful for the stressful thing, maybe a little bit after, but it's not going to take over your entire day. You're able to recover from hard moments and kind of bounce back a little bit faster. You don't spiral as easily or spiral over smaller things. Your reactions feel proportional to what's happening. So again, a regulated nervous system is going to feel all the feelings, but the reactions feel proportional to what's happening. You pause before you respond. So it's not that immediate like reactive of, kind of that like, that immediate just like spark of, just responding right away. You can pause before you respond. You feel connected to yourself and to other people, and that sleep feels restorative most nights. So I would say for me, and from what I've heard from a lot of my students, is focus and sleep, and then the way that they are like being reactive or not so reactive with their loved ones are like the 3 easiest ways to sort of do a little bit of a litmus test as to how is my nervous system doing. Because even if you're sleeping a lot at night, but it doesn't actually feel restorative, that can be something that sort of goes back to the nervous system, or just not being able to focus on things. Because like I said, think about it. When you're stressed, when you're anxious, when you're activated, when your body is tense, it's really hard to just like dial in and focus on something because you have a lot on your mind. There's a lot going on. And then the way that we respond to our loved ones is also a great window into how our nervous system is doing, right? Are we being patient with our kids? Do we listen and pause before we respond to our partners? Are we able to listen to, our parents' story that they've told us for, the 5th time? Are we able to kind of be relaxed when we're with our family? That type of thing. But then on the flip side, we have dysregulation. So dysregulation happens when your nervous system gets stuck. It could be stuck in fight or flight, which is much more common. Could also be stuck in that freeze or shut down response. Now that's not as common, but it does happen. That is a separate thing. Often when people are truly in like a nervous system, like shut down response, they need like bigger support from that versus just kind of being stuck in this chronic fight or flight. So if you are regulated, you might have sort of the stress to recovery, return to baseline trajectory, where if you're dysregulated, it's going to go stress, which is going to make you more stressed, which then is going to lead to even more stress. Or it might feel like overwhelm to then shut down to maybe guilt about that shutdown and then even more shutdown. So that's sort of the trajectory. We want the stress, recovery, return to baseline trajectory. But for many of us, it's going to be stress, 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 which is sort of that more dysregulated state. And if you're chronically dysregulated, what it might feel like is that you are waking up already tense. Maybe your thoughts are racing. It could be, from the minute you wake up. I hear about this one a lot, but I think that's because often people come to meditation because they want to quiet their mind and slow down their racing thoughts. But this one I know is quite common. So having racing thoughts, even as soon as like you wake up in the morning, throughout the day, or when you're trying to fall asleep, or all of those, the small things feel big. You're irritable, you're snapping at people that you love, maybe your jaw hurts from clenching, you can't fall asleep even though you're exhausted. It's sort of that wired but tired feeling. And I would just like to say, just humanizing this for a moment, I absolutely have experienced all of these things at different points. As recent as this week, to be honest, some of these things. And we're about to get here, but this is the big thing with a quote regulated nervous system, is that you are still going to experience these things. And I don't think my nervous system is necessarily like super, like all the time regulated. But if we think about it as being a more resilient nervous system, you're going to be irritable sometimes, right? Someone's going to say something that maybe is small. Maybe it's, the straw that broke the camel's back. And because your nervous system, you're more in that dysregulated state. It's like that one more thing where you're just like, and then it feels really big. I am a jaw clencher. I am a jaw clencher 100%. And that is one that gets me a lot. And I know it happens a lot when I drive. And I'll just be like driving errands. And all of a sudden I'll be like, oh my gosh, unclench your jaw. And I know that that's like a nervous system thing. But a regulated nervous system is able to, kind of notice these things and hopefully be able to like return back to baseline. So if you're being like, oh my gosh, I experience these things, I do too. So you're not alone. This happens to everyone. On the other side, though, a dysregulated nervous system, maybe if it's more of that shutdown or freeze, might feel more like You just feel so flat, so unmotivated, completely disconnected. A dysregulated nervous system, often like you're scrolling a lot, but you don't absorb a lot, like a lot of doom scrolling, like for hours. You rest, but you don't feel restored. You procrastinate, and then you feel ashamed for procrastinating. But the thing is that pretty much, I would say most functioning adults experience these types of things, and that most functioning adults are not fully in just one state. They might be in some kind of a mixed state, especially if they're dysregulated. It might feel more like a mixed state. You might be wired and tired, productive, but also feeling anxious, successful, but also feeling a little bit sad, or maybe you are exhausted, but you're unable to slow down, right? A lot of those kind of mixed things where you're like, how am I experiencing these same things at the same time? That's usually a sign of nervous system dysregulation. And regulation is all about being able to shift between states and not always being calm. So if you've been living in your dysregulated state, or you've been there for years, it might not feel that dramatic, which is kind of the thing that makes it a little bit tricky, is that it might actually just feel very normal because it is your new normal. Because remember, our nervous system is adapting. It's getting better. It's getting more efficient. It's those firefighters where maybe they were still learning when they were fighting their first 10 fires, but now they're on their 1,000th fire. That's kind of a tongue twister. They've got it down. And so this just might be your new normal. And that's how it works. So when we look at regulating your nervous system, it's not going to be about a complete overhaul or becoming a new person or getting a new life. It's going to be about working to increase your nervous system's flexibility and capacity. It's about widening what's called your window of tolerance, which the first time I actually heard this phrase, it was in therapy. Shout out to Lindsay, my therapist. But this idea of a window of tolerance, which is basically the range in which you can experience things like emotion, stress, stimulation without tipping into fight or flight or freeze. So when it was first described to me, Lindsay, she described it like this, is that basically every day you wake up and you have a different window. Sometimes your window is narrow, and like small things can kind of knock you out of your window or like your spectrum or range of tolerance. And your window can change based on your circumstances. So every single day you might wake up with a different window. And I believe she first described this to me when I don't even remember. I can't remember if it was pork chop or Poppy, but one of the kids was really small. And I was just talking about, just not having a lot of patience and things like that. And so she was describing this idea of a window of tolerance and how something that can be so helpful, and this is really helpful, when you wake up every morning, is just checking in, how big is my window today? And right from the get-go often. And to recognize that everyone around you also has their own window of tolerance. And so it must have been when Poppy was young, because I'm recalling this conversation now, because like pork chop, for example, he has his own window of tolerance because maybe he didn't sleep very well, or maybe he, is going through a growth spurt and he's uncomfortable, or going through some kind of a neurological leap or something like that. Maybe him and his sister have been bickering more, all sorts of things that like can sort of make that window of tolerance smaller, but then things can also make it wider. And so a really helpful thing is every morning just waking up and asking yourself, like, how's my window today? Or like, how big is my window today? And if it's narrow, that's okay. We're not going to shame ourselves about it. We're just going to be like, okay, that's really good information. I have a very narrow window of tolerance today, and I'm going to be aware of that. And it really, really does help. And it helps me at least to make these conscious decisions as I'm moving through my day, recognizing that maybe my window is a little bit more narrow, or maybe I have a wider window. So maybe I like take some risks, put myself out there a little bit more, that type of thing. And so that's just a helpful tool in general, is when you wake up, ask yourself, like, how big is my window today? But when your window is narrow, small things can kind of knock you out of that window. And your window is going to change based on your circumstances. So if you didn't sleep well, you might wake up with a smaller window. If you're stressed at work, or you have like a long, stressful work project, like kind of that, longer than normal, not just like a day or two, maybe you have like 2 really stressful weeks at work, or like maybe you're preparing for a trip and so you're doing a lot. These types of things can make your window smaller. But on the flip side, maybe you've been exercising a little bit more, or eating well, or sleeping well. That might make your window broader. And when your window expands, you can hold more and you can move more within that window. And so if you're sitting here being like, I don't know if I'm regulated or dysregulated, I would reframe that. Maybe ask yourself questions like, how quickly do I bounce back from stress or stressful situations? How emotionally flexible do I feel? Like, how well am I able to sort of deal with these emotional states? Do I have access to calm, or does that feel out of reach? And then also, do I feel like I'm stuck in fight or flight, or does that fight or flight state feel like my default? And I think these types of questions can help narrow in as to whether you're in more of a dysregulated state. I would say that by and large, the majority of us are at least somewhat in a dysregulated state, even if it's just from the completely oversaturated, overstimulating world that we live in, from, constantly, screens everywhere, noises everywhere, constant communication, being in constant contact with what's happening all over the world, trying to process these things, all of that all at once is very overstimulating. So the majority of us are probably at least a little bit dysregulated. But the good news is that flexibility can be trained. So this is why I think the term like heal your nervous system, and I thought about kind of calling this heal your nervous system in 30 days because I thought, I don't know, we'll see if I might end up naming it that. But anyways, that's why I think the term heal your nervous system is a little bit misleading because it's not exactly broken or like sick. It's just stuck in a chronic state and it needs to slowly be brought out of that state and just trained to respond in a different way. So you're just trying to increase your nervous system's flexibility and its resilience. You're not necessarily like healing it. It doesn't have like a wound in it that needs to be healed. It's like we need to it's almost a bit more like a muscle. Like you need to, if it's tight and it's clenched, it's kind of stuck in that like clenched state, we need to get it to soften a little bit and get a little bit more flexible so that it can move a little bit easier. So to be completely realistic, you cannot undo lifelong stress patterns in 30 days. You cannot erase trauma in 30 days, and you cannot force regulation. However, realistically, what you can do in 30 days is you can increase your awareness and understanding. Like I said, even that simple asking yourself in the morning, where's my window? How big is my window today? Can be so helpful. But increasing your awareness around regulation and dysregulation. You can create safety cues for your body and for your mind and the environment that you're in. You can reduce unnecessary stressors and just improve your baseline resilience and help to build some of those regulation skills. So it's more like I said, building that muscle. So if you think about if you were to go and work out, 30 days wouldn't necessarily transform your entire body if you just went back to the gym. But if you went to the gym consistently, and I don't know, lifted weights or did anything consistently for 30 days, you would feel stronger and you would absolutely see changes. So all of that leads me to, in an ideal world, if one of you came to me and said, Kelly, I want to support my nervous system as best as I realistically can over the next 30 days so that I feel better and I don't feel like I'm chronically in this fight or flight all the time. What should I do? This is exactly what I would tell you. And I had so much fun coming up with this. So I broke it down into 4 weeks and I gave each week a theme and a purpose and a goal. So week number 1, I would focus on stabilizing and building a foundation for your nervous system. So the goal here for week 1 would really be to reduce just the overall stress load that you're currently experiencing with small habitual changes, little tweaks that are really going to add up, and that's it. So in week 1, this is what I would have you focus on. This would be the thing that I would really want you to focus on. Going to bed 30 minutes earlier. Sleep across the board, phenomenal for the nervous system. Also across the board, if you're not getting enough sleep, dysregulating for the nervous system. I would ask yourself, is there anything on your mental load that you don't need to worry about right now? This could be, it's usually the shoulds, right? I should organize my basement. I should probably swap out my kids' clothes from the whatever, take out the 4 T's and make sure that it's all 5 teas. This is a should that's been on my mind because I swear pork chop has grown like, it feels like, I don't know, like a foot in the last like few months. I know that's not realistic, but that's what it feels like. But anyways, think about all of the shoulds that are just running in your brain at the moment and asking yourself, how many of these shoulds do I actually need to do? And most of them will be like, honestly, like none of them. Shoulds love to live in that space of like, it doesn't actually need to be done, but it just likes to run on autopilot in the back of your brain. And so what I would really recommend is looking at all those different shoulds and then giving yourself permission, even if it's for the next 30 days, to be like, you know what? 30 days from now, like pork chop is still fitting in the clothes that are in there. And like 30 days from now, in like a month's time, yeah, I probably will need to swap that out. But I don't need to be thinking about this 5 times a week between now and then, right? And so just let yourself take it off of your mental plate. And if it's not urgent and it doesn't need to be done right now, you're going to give yourself permission to release it. Okay, another thing you would focus on in week 1 is eating regularly and also making sure that you're getting some protein with each meal. Let me know in the comments if you're if you're surprised by my recommendation so far. And I know a lot of these things it's like, okay, I know. Again, I quote, should be doing it. These are the things I want you to take these off of the shoulds and put them into the, but I am doing them. So eating regularly, right? Blood sugar stability also kind of correlates to nervous system stability. So eating regularly, we don't have to completely overhaul everything. Again, it's these small little tweaks, so just making sure we're getting some protein with our meals. I know, Alyssa is probably listening to this right now because she's also a personal trainer and being like, they should be getting at least 30 to 40 grams of protein. I'm not going to tell you how many grams. Simple habitual tweaks. Have some protein and eat regularly. Don't let yourself get like so hungry and like throw everything out of whack. 5 minutes of deep breathing or meditation or mindfulness every day. That could be 5 minutes of deep breathing with those long exhales, a 5-minute guided meditation. It could be sitting outside and just noticing what you see and hear for 5 minutes. That's it every day. Reduce caffeine if this applies to you slightly, because also if you do anything too drastic, I really wanted to look into this because I do feel like a lot of times the nervous system marketing out there, it's a lot of really drastic stuff. And so I looked into this. I was like, is that actually supportive to the nervous system? Turns out not really. The nervous system, you think about it, right? We slowly ramped up to this state. We walked up. It's more like a ramp that we're walking up slowly. It's like it's a very long but not so steep ramp. And so the longer you're on it, though, you're like, oh my gosh, I've gotten so much higher up this ramp. So you're just going to slowly back out of it. And that's actually the most supportive way to sort of get out of this state. And not anything big, not anything drastic. So you're only going to reduce your caffeine slightly if applicable. This means if you have 4 cups of coffee a day, maybe you have 3. Or maybe your 4th coffee of the day is a half calf. Maybe if you have a triple shot latte, the only thing you change is just one of your lattes as a double shot. You're just going to slightly reduce your caffeine because we also don't want to get those big headaches. We don't want to have this big, swing of throwing everything's off. Just slightly reduce your caffeine. Maybe say if you have your last cup of coffee at 2 p.m., say, you know what, I'm going to be done drinking coffee by 1 p.m. or noon. Just a little tweak. It's going to help. Get outside in the morning for sunlight if possible, even 5 minutes. And you're going to try to move your body 20 minutes a day. I know this sounds like a lot. As I'm reading this out, I'm like, this sounds like a lot. But it's these little habitual things. I'll recap briefly. 30 minutes. Going to bed earlier. 30 minutes. Giving yourself permission, take all of those shoulds off of the mental load for the next month or so. You're going to eat regularly. We're not going to, blood sugar is not going to be going crazy, flying all over, up and down, up and down. We're going to have protein when we're eating. 5 minutes of some kind of a intentional something, whether it be deep breathing, mindfulness, meditation. If you do a lot of caffeine, reducing it slightly, trying to get some morning sunlight, and just moving your body for 20 minutes a day. It doesn't have to, you could go for a little walk. You could listen to some music, do some yoga, stretching, anything. Just moving the body a little bit, like 20 minutes a day. That is what I would do for week 1. Just stabilizing and building a foundation for your nervous system. It's like just returning home, picking up on some of these good regulating habits, and that's it. Nothing extreme, no cold plunges, no big digital detoxes, nothing like that. Just supporting like your foundational well-being. That's what I would do for week 1. Week 2, building safety in your body and environment. That's the theme. The goal would be sending daily cues of safety. So really working on being mindful of the environment and how your body is responding. So if possible, keep the general well-being practices from week 1, right? So a slight reduction in caffeine, go to bed 30 minutes earlier. You don't even necessarily have to sleep 30 minutes more, fall asleep earlier. Just go to bed earlier. Even that can be enough to like help. Some daily movement, regular meals, things like that. You're gonna keep that. We're gonna try to keep that for like our whole month, for forever if we can, just these basic kind of self-care practices. But in week 2, we're going to take that foundational things that we're already doing that we built on week 1, and then we're going to up it to 10 minutes daily of meditation of any style, specifically meditation. Now I have that 5-day nervous system reset. I'm going to do a 10-minute nervous system meditation for you on Sunday. So you'll have that one ready to go. But any kind of meditation, we know meditation, phenomenal for regulating the nervous system, for getting you out of that fight or flight, for quieting down the amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight. So we're going to try to do 10 minutes of meditation every day. You're going to do one no phone activity every day for like 30 minutes. You're going to try. This can be an activity you're already doing. If you go for a walk every day, if it's a 30-minute walk, this week try, not bringing your phone, or bringing it for safety, but not listening to anything, not looking at your phone, just walking just to walk. Reading a book, cooking dinner without your phone. If none of that seems applicable, try driving one part of your commute to work or one of your errands without listening to anything. No phone. Try to do one no phone activity a day for like a maximum of 30 minutes. Take 5 deep breaths before eating any meals. I know that sounds crazy, but it's really going to help. And then add one connection thing every day. Giving someone a hug, snuggling with your pup or your fur baby, sending a little voice note to a friend, one little just connection thing a day. So recapping, week 2, we're really working on building safety in our bodies and in our environment. So we're meditating for 10 minutes a day. We're continuing the wellness practices from week 1. We're going to try to do one no phone activity a day, take 5 deep breaths before eating, and have one little connection thing a day. And the one about snuggling your fur baby or an animal in particular, this one's actually really great. This is a big piece why actually petting animals is regulating for the nervous system. But part of the reason why they put like this cute dog that was in the airport for people to pet if they were nervous is because pets help us to co-regulate, which co-regulation is basically borrowing someone's calm or borrowing someone else's regulated state that we can use for ourselves. So it's like when you were a kid and you're upset, maybe you fell and scraped your knee or something didn't go your way. Maybe you played basketball and you didn't play well, you felt bad about it, and you're upset, and just being like held by your parent or just being close to your parent made you feel better. That's because you were co-regulating with them. So kids actually, I think it was, I looked into this because I was like, I'm definitely my kid's co-regulator. And I was like, when do kids start to regulate for themselves? And it said that you don't fully have that skill until like almost 9 years old, I think. But still, even as an adult, like co-regulation feels good. It's like being able to borrow from someone else's regulated state. And so like pets are really good with that. If you're really close to your partner or something like that, like someone whose presence just helps to calm you, that can be really great. So that was week 2. Week 3. Now, this one might surprise you, but week 3, we're going to expand our capacity. So remember, a regulated nervous system is a flexible and resilient nervous system. So what we're going to do is we're going to gently stretch the window of tolerance, meaning that you're going to introduce a little bit of intentional stress back into your week. So with a purpose, while keeping all those regulating practices, while still prioritizing sleeping, eating regular meals, meditating for 10 minutes a day. And if you think, Kelly, I can't meditate for 10 minutes a day, this is like a 30-day thing. Okay, if you decide after the 30 days you don't want to do it every day, that's okay. But it's really going to help you if you do it. Okay, so you're going to try adding on top of what you're done week 1, week 2, mild stress exposure with recovery. So this might be a slightly challenging workout or some kind of a workout in general. And then after that, some kind of a recovery. So maybe listening to a meditation, like just stretching and winding down, listening to calming music, again, sitting with your fur baby after a workout or something like that. Maybe you have a moderately difficult conversation. I would not recommend we're working on creating flexibility. Like if you think of it as flexibility in your muscles, if you feel like your nervous system muscles are so stiff that like you couldn't even touch your toes, don't try to have the conversation that would feel like the equivalent of like doing the splits for your nervous system. Don't do that. Okay, we're just going to have like a mildly difficult conversation. Something where you can do it and it might feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do it. And then once it's over, you can recover and then go back to a baseline. I was trying to think of an example of this in my everyday life as to like, what would I consider like a mild thing? The best example that I came up with, I know this is kind of like parenting specific, but it's some of the things where it's just like things that you have. Okay. This is such like a niche. This is such a niche thing. So for me, an example, this isn't the parenting specific one, but this one just came to mind and it's better. So I don't think I told you guys, but recently I totaled my car, and basically what happened, talk about dysregulating for the nervous system. But I was driving on the highway. I live in Minnesota. There's a lot of snow, a lot of ice. We had like big snowstorm like a couple of weeks back, and the roads were clear and there was no snow, but I hit some black ice when I was on the highway, and I like spun out and lost control of the car and went head first into the cement divider in the highway at like 45 miles per hour. I was okay. I somehow, like, I've been thinking about this like every day. It was weeks ago, but like the universe was absolutely looking out for me. The kids were not in the car. It was just me. And I walked away from it. The car was trashed, totaled, like front of it missing, everything. And I totaled my car. And I went to, so I was like, I've never done that before. And there's a point to the story, I promise, because I haven't had this moderately difficult conversation, but I intend to. And so I had to find a new car. I've never totaled my car before. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, you're going through insurance. And then they're like, oh, well, here's what we think your car is valued, which is whatever, always like peanuts. But anyway, so I didn't have a car. I had to come up with a new car. And usually I'd really think about this. I hold on to cars a long time. I'd really think about this. But I was like, I don't know. I need to find a car. So I was like car shopping, and I went to this one like dealership. I wanted to try some cars. And as soon as I got there, this guy, John was his name. I'm not going to tell you where he works. John immediately asked me where my husband was. And I was like, excuse me, John, do I strike you as the type of person that needs my husband here to like pick? Oh my gosh, I was so annoyed at John. And I was like, oh my God. And now John, I should have just walked out. I was like, oh my God, now John and I have to drive like 4 cars together. Anyways, I did not get a car from John, just so you all know. Absolutely not. However, John has been texting me and wanting to know what car I went with. And I intend to tell him what car I went with. I could have purchased that car from him, but I chose not to. And I intend to tell him that I chose not to buy a car from him because, and not only did he do that, but then I was like listing out some of the cars that I wanted to test drive. And one of them, he was like, oh, that's kind of an expensive car. And I was like, John, why are you being like this? Anyways, I was very frustrated with John. I do intend to give John feedback. I haven't gotten around to it yet. I'm kind of avoiding it because it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But John keeps asking. I do intend to give him feedback as to why I didn't, go through insurance and get a new car from him. And I'm going to give him feedback. That to me would be an example of like a moderately difficult conversation. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not going to, at the end, John apparently didn't really like me from the moment he saw me. He wanted to know where my husband was. But I will share that. And for me, from someone who really, I really want, it's not a people-pleasing thing. I like to have positive interactions with people. Like something that I feel really strongly about is every interaction you have with someone is an opportunity to have a positive, negative, or neutral interaction. I really strive to have, with intention, the interactions that I have with people at best be positive, but at worst just be neutral. I don't want to make people feel worse about themselves just from being in my energy. And so I'll give John feedback. I'm putting it off a little bit, but that would be like the perfect like expander for me, would be just, biting the bullet and giving John feedback that I didn't really appreciate his misogynistic comments when I was trying to replace my totaled car. And yeah, so I'd do that. I'd feel uncomfortable. I would recover and then go back to baseline. And then some kind of like a new activity. So this is going to be an expander. This is going to be more of that like sort of positive activation where it's like kind of like the good kind of stress. Maybe you're putting yourself out there a little bit, trying something new. You're like, oh my gosh, that's kind of new. That's different. I've never done that before. I'm kind of nervous. I'm kind of excited. That's the good activation of the nervous system. And then we're going to do it. And then we're going to be like, oh, look at me. I was so brave. I did that thing. That's awesome. And then we're going to recover and work on going back to baseline. So we're going to practice returning to calm intentionally. So we're going to have like little bits of intentional stress, expansive stress, and then we're going to then put that with something that helps you kind of regulate your nervous system, return to more of a calm state. And that's really what this week is all about, is a little bit of that expansion, right? Where we're going to let ourselves, maybe physically we do something a little bit more strenuous. So we have some of that physical stress. I'm sort of that emotional, like telling someone, John, you blew it. Doing something new, the good kind of stress, and then pairing that with then something that will be more regulating, like, oh, I did it. Or, maybe I'll talk to John. And then after I talk to John, I'll go out for a walk out in nature. And so practicing like stressor, and then going back to baseline, recovering, stressor, recovering, going back to baseline. That's what that week 3 is really all about, is stress, recovery, like integration, return to baseline. And then week 4, the final week, this is going to be all about, the theme is just integration. And the goal is like consistency. So you're going to maintain that great sleep. You're going to maintain your 10 minutes. If you want to do a little bit more, you can do that, of meditation. You can add in this week, I think, anything that feels good, like red light therapy. If there is anything that's like a little bit bigger at this point that you want to put in, you could do that. Like, I mean, bigger by like big nervous system regulators, maybe like some acupuncture this week, something like that, like integration. And then trying to reduce one chronic stressor if possible. So this is the one that's a little bit more mom specific, but what I mean by reducing one chronic stressor if possible, I want you to contemplate taking one thing out of your life that is causing you a lot of stress that doesn't need to be in your life. This is my example. I stopped taking the kids. We used to go to a music class on Thursday mornings. I don't take them to that class anymore because I know it just sounds like a nervous system. What stories behind the scenes you're getting in this episode? And the music class was great. I liked it. It was like taught by like this music therapist. And actually, we'd do like songs and emotions and things like that. But for whatever reason, on those Thursday mornings, it was so hard for the kids and I, specifically the kids. Okay, let's be real. It was not hard for me. It was like pulling teeth trying to get them out of the house for this 30-minute music class that like they thought was okay. I really liked the class because it was taught by a music therapist, and it was all around emotion regulation, and it was like my kind of thing. The kids were lukewarm on it. And so every Thursday I was getting the kids out of the house, and we do other things in the mornings. And I knew that the kids were just craving like some mornings just to like be at home and just play and like whatever, because Pork Chop has half day schools in the afternoon. And I knew that, but I just, for so long, just kept bringing them to this music class. And when I tell you, it was like pulling teeth getting them out of the house. I mean, it is like, everyone is like in tears by the time we're just trying to like get shoes on the feet. And it just wasn't working for us. And this class was only 30 minutes. It was like a 20-minute drive, like each way, a 30-minute class. And it just occurred to me the last week that we went, as I was like loading the kids in the car, and it was like, once again, everyone was just like a hot mess. And I was like, why am I going to this? Why are we going through this every Thursday morning? And like everyone is just an absolute hot mess and like upset and like all of these things. This is a disaster every Thursday morning. And why? And I just asked myself, like, what is the benefit? And there wasn't, again, this is a great music class. I really did like the concept of the class. It just wasn't working for us. And I was like, why am I still doing this? And I just had this moment of like, Kelly, what is the like, unless this music class is like changing your kids' lives, why all of the stress for this music class? And so I just stopped going. And like whatever, the session was done. And so then I was like, well, I'm just not going to sign up for the next session. And it was such a relief. I know this seems so simple because sometimes it is kind of that simple, well, it's simple in concept, but actually doing it. And my point is there's probably something in your life too that you're doing. Like, what is the music class of your life where you're like, why am I still doing this? Why am I still going through the stressors of this thing? For what? And so identifying one of those chronic stressors and then just be done with it. And just what is the music class of your life? What is the little kid music class of your life that actually causes so much stress that you could just be done with? And then you don't have to do it anymore. So that is the big thing of like, it's all about like integration. So continuing all the things you've been doing for the first 3 weeks, doing those all together, and then just taking one big chronic stressor off of your plate and then doing some reflection. So what feels different? Maybe something that you could do is do a little journal entry on day 1 and just ask yourself the same question on day 1. How does it feel to be in my body today? And then ask yourself that same question on day 30. And then compare your 2 responses. And I think it'll give you a lot of information as to how that month went. So just a lot of reflecting of what feels different, how am I doing, all of that. And that's really what week 4 is, like all of this integration, taking a chronic stressor off of your plate, and then really reflecting on what feels better and getting that data. So that would be my ideal if you came to me and asked me to make you a 30-day nervous system support plan, which none of you did, but I asked myself to do that and I love doing it. That's what I would do. And yeah, that's really it. Just remember to regulate. You don't need a perfect morning routine. You don't need necessarily a big supplement stack. You don't need a new identity or a new personality, but you just really need like repetition and safety, enough rest, and a little less pressure in your life. So your nervous system, it's not broken. It doesn't necessarily need to be healed. It has adapted and evolved in a way that's no longer serving you. And so you need to rebuild it a little bit, retrain it. And that's what all of this is about. And absolutely a lot can happen in 30 days. So thank you so much for being here and listening to this. I had so much fun putting it together. Let me know what you think. And yeah, I'll put the 5-day nervous system reset information in the show notes. Give it a try. Try some of these things out. See how it does for your nervous system. And I will see you on Sunday for a 10-minute nervous system regulation meditation.